Joining us now for a little midterms check-in, we have J. Miles Coleman. He is associate editor of Saboteaux's Crystal Ball. Great to see you, Miles.
Good to see you, man.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
you guys for having me.
So I saw this piece in the Washington Post. Let's go ahead and put it up on the screen, and I wanted to run it by you and if you thought there was any there. They say this little-known election predictor should worry Democrats, and they point to the primary vote turnout, which has favored Republicans. And what I mean by that is more Republicans have turned out during the primaries than Democrats. Historically, the party where more of their voters turn out in the primaries ends up doing well in the midterm. So if we look back at 2018, Democrats exceeded Republicans in the primary by 8 points. They end up winning the House with a 9-point margin in the popular vote. This time around, Republicans have had a 4-point advantage in terms of their primary voters turning out in those elections. Do you think that that translates into a good performance for Republicans ultimately in November?
Yeah, sure. So, well, for us forecasters, we like to have all of the signs in one way or the other, right? And kind of this year, the Democrats have pointed to their overperformance in special elections. Joe Biden's approval isn't great, but it's going up. Meanwhile, Republicans have always been pointing to the turnout in the primaries. What I think is important to keep in mind here is we have to keep looking at the big picture. The state of Ohio, for example, if you look at that, in the Ohio primary, where Republicans outvoted Democrats with something like 68% of the vote. Well, J.D. Vance, may end up winning, but, he's not going to be winning with, 68%. But however, I think that does tell me that Ohio, for example, may be a bit tilted in the Republican direction. So I think we have to keep in mind, this is big picture. In the past, as you said, it's performed well. In 2006, it was, a 54% Democratic electorate. It was about that in 18 as well. Those were very good Democratic years. In 2010 and 2014, Republicans had, a 55, 56% advantage, and they went on to have a good year. So, I think overall this tells me that this cycle is on track to be maybe, a Republican-leaning year, but, maybe not as much as 2010 or 2014. Yeah. And, I think if you told a lot of Democrats that at the start of this cycle, when it was looking like very much a red wave, they would have taken that deal.
Yeah,
right.
true.
I think you're absolutely correct. So, but how does that translate then into close races? Like, how exactly do you forecast that? Not 2010, not 2000, not some crazy red wave election, but still, slight Republican. How does that work in some of the more swing states? Like, what are some of the things you guys look at there?
Yes. So I think, not to be selfish, but, kind of going back to Virginia here last year, one of the reasons that our governor, the Republican Glenn Youngkin won is because Republican turnout was super high. That's another thing that really caught my attention about these numbers is, compared to 2010 and 2014, which were Obama's rough midterms, they were very low turnout. Well, guess what? Nothing this year suggests to me that 2022 was going to be a low turnout year. So basically, Youngkin won with high Republican turnout. And I think the Roe v. Wade ruling has given Democrats, that may help with their turnout. As I think it was interesting that in this study, they divided the states into, states that voted for Roe and states that voted after Roe. Those states that went after, you did see Democrats doing a bit better.
Interesting.
So, this is something that Democratic candidates in many key states are running on, the Supreme Court ruling. So, it's something that could maybe help Democratic enthusiasm in a lot of those key races, like, Pennsylvania or even Florida. Right. That's something that Val Demings is very much trying to run on.
Yeah, that's actually a key point, is that some of these primaries that are being factored into these midterm turnout numbers, some of these occurred before Dobbs. So the increased Democratic enthusiasm, because, if you're a Democrat and this is your theory of the case, that sort of this Dobbs decision changed everything and now we have the enthusiasm, it wouldn't fully factor that change in the landscape. So that is an interesting note. Maz, there's been a big conversation lately about how the polls are. We have this every year. Nate Cohen in the New York Times, we covered here, wrote a big analysis that I'm sure you took a look at, saying basically some of the same warning signs are flashing. Some of the same states that had big polling misses previously, places like in Ohio and Wisconsin, especially industrial Midwest, especially states with large white working class voters, they seem to be coming out with polls now that are at odds with what some of the other fundamentals might predict in those races. How are you analyzing the state of the polls? How are you factoring those in when you're doing your own, prognostications and analysis of these races?
Yeah, it's funny because us in the forecasting world, I think there's kind of that military phrase that you're always fighting yesterday's war. I mean, that's kind of what we're doing, looking at 2010 and 2016. But actually, there was an interesting piece out today by the other Nate Silver, in 538. And one thing he was saying is, the polling misses haven't been, uniform from cycle to cycle. And back when Obama was running for re-election back in 2012. Polls tended to underestimate him, but no one really noticed because he was kind of on track to win anyway. So
right.
It's been funny this year because kind of as you said, Krystal, no one trusts polls from the industrial Midwest. I mean that's like
right.
a no poll zone almost.
Yeah.
So for us, we try to look at other factors like how much is each party spending in each state? I mean, as they say, kind of in a lot of these races, it's the money that ends up talking. So that's what we track as well. What I'm interested to see is, as especially because of the polling misses in 2016 and 2020, how much of that was Trump being on the ballot? What was sort of an interesting case in Georgia back last year when they had those runoffs. Not a lot of pollsters wanted to touch those runoffs because they were sort of a weird situation, right, in early January. If you look at the averages, the Georgia runoff polling was actually decent. So I'm wondering, how much of that is Trump being off of the ballot?
That's interesting.
Yeah, I think about this all the time, Miles. I'm like, is Trump the confounding variable, or when he's off, and like when he's off the ballot, does it actually mean polls quote unquote revert to the mean, or did 2016 just like mean some sort of crazy demarcation point for all of polling? I found it useful to look at some issues like the economy and others, like who's trusted on those, because those were pretty good proxies for the results in 2020. Am I doing the right thing? Like, what are some other things that you guys look at like that?
Yeah, that's, what I looked at for a while in presidential elections in the exit polls. There was always a question they asked on exit polls, which candidate cares more about people like me?
Yeah.
It was that candidate who would almost always win. So I think definitely the Democrats are trying to run on that abortion issue, as we saw in the special election for New York 19. That's what Congressman now Ryan ran on. And I think something I'm taking away from the abortion issue specifically, there was a poll from Quinnipiac, I think last week, that they asked about specific issues. And yes, the economy was still the sort of top issue, but abortion was next. And they asked voters, okay, well, how important is it that a candidate shares your stance on abortion? Most of the voters who said yes were those college-educated white voters that have trended more Democrat. So that tells me, even if Democrats have a rough midterm, I can see them holding their own in those more college-educated states like New Hampshire or New Jersey, states like that.
That's interesting. Yeah, you were talking about that metric of like, who cares about me more? We were looking at polling out of Pennsylvania where it wasn't exactly the same question, but they asked voters if they thought that Fetterman said what he believed or was just like saying what he thought people wanted to hear. And, same thing with Oz, same question. And overwhelmingly, voters, it was like 70%, thought Oz was just telling them whatever they wanted to hear. And to me, that was almost as significant a result as any of the other polling numbers that came out of that, especially since it was so lopsided. I thought, oh, they just think this guy's really full of it. And that could be an issue for him ultimately in terms of, when it comes time to vote. Based on all of the factors that we talked about here, the midterm turnout, the polls, the special elections, all of these things, what races do you think that control of the Senate is really going to come down to? What are the true toss-up states that you're looking at right now?
Well, just very quickly, Krystal, on that point about Dr. Oz. I mean, wasn't it over this weekend where Trump was talking about J.D. Vance, and he's like, "Yeah, he just kisses my ass." That's that's
oh,
why
I missed that. That's hilarious.
I didn't see that.
But in terms of the states we're looking at, there were two polls out this morning. From the state of Georgia. One from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution had Warnock, slightly down. Another from Marist had him slightly up. I think it wouldn't be crazy if this was the second cycle in a row where control of the Senate goes to a Georgia runoff.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
That's definitely in the cards. We at the Crystal Ball, we did move a few races recently in favor of Democrats. We moved that Pennsylvania race a few weeks ago from toss-up to leans down Democratic. We think Oz, is at least a slight disadvantage right now. We think Mark Kelly, at least right now, is looking decently in Arizona. One state that we've been sort of bearish on for Democrats, but we still have it in the toss-up category, is Nevada. That's a state that's been sort of unpredictable in recent cycles. Unlike a lot of blue states, I was talking about voters who are more educated being sort of trended towards Democrats. Nevada is a more working class state. So, you think about what the Democratic base is there. It's basically tourism workers. It's basically culinary workers, more kind of working class. Well, if the economy is more of an issue there, are those voters going to feel it a bit more and vote a bit more Republican? So I would say those states. I've noticed Democrats are trying to make plays in these kind of light red states like Wisconsin or North Carolina, even in Ohio. So we'll see if those come into play as well. But we sort of have those in the leans Republican category still.
Skeptical on those ones. Thank you so much for the breakdown. Super helpful. Always great to see you, Miles.
Thanks, Miles. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, our pleasure.
See you later. Thanks so much for watching, guys. We really appreciate it. So, as we said, we got the Chicago tickets. They're on sale. Please buy them if you're somewhere in the Midwest or not. You can come from anywhere, as with some Japan, New Zealand, London, people from all over. It's a fun time. It's a welcoming community at whichever one of these shows that you will join us at. And we got some special merch that will be sold there too, which we're working on right now. That'll be fun. And we got the discount right now for Counterpoints, 10% off up until October 5th. Lots of people are capitalizing on that. It's so helpful to us here at the show. We have great content for everybody on Wednesday. We've got great content for everybody on Friday. It's very happy for me to say that. And we will see you all on Thursday.
Love y'all. See you Thursday. Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.